Undercover boss orders coffee and toast stops cold when waitress cries because she can't pay rent. 12:03 p.m. The midday sun over the coastal town of Portwell poured heat into the old quarter, turning every window pane into a fogged-up mirror of burning glass.
A faint breeze rustled the slender branches lining the sidewalk, but it wasn't enough to push back the heaviness cloaking the street.
In that humid stillness, a man pushed open the door to the Sunrise Diner, an old-style breakfast joint that looked as ordinary as any eatery tucked into a quiet city block. The door chimed softly. No one looked up. No one noticed. They didn't know that the man who just walked in was Michael Foster, 50 years old, founder of the legendary calf chain Brass Bean, a name that had reshaped American coffee culture over the past 2 decades. But today he wasn't wearing a suit. No assistants. No chauffeur. Just a plain gray t-shirt like khaki pants and a faded baseball cap pulled low. He looked like anyone exactly how he wanted to be seen, because today he didn't come to be served. He came to see who the system he built was really serving, and more importantly, who it was forgetting. Michael chose a table by the window where sunlight reflected off the street just beyond. He sat without urgency, taking in the room, peeling wood panels, an old jazz track playing softly in faded lettering on the wall menu. A young waitress passed by without a word, not because she was busy, but because she saw him and looked away. Michael wasn't surprised. He had heard vague reports about the Portwell branch, slight revenue dip, unclear customer feedback staff walking off shifts midday. But no number had told him what exactly was wrong. That's why he was here unannounced. No cameras. No authority. Just silence and a pair of observant eyes. Minutes passed. No menu. No greeting. Michael simply sat until a sharp, dry voice cut through the heavy air like a knife. You can't sit there. He looked up. A woman in her early 40s, hair pulled back, name tag reading Tracy Del Mar. Her eyes scanned him like he was a stray, not a customer. That table's for regulars. We save it for people who know how to order properly. The words weren't loud, but each one froze the air in the room. Even the young customer at the next table paused, spoon halfway to mouth. Michael kept a calm face. I just want something simple. Black coffee. Toast. If the diner's open, I assume I have the same rights as anyone else. No apology. No correction. Not a flicker of discomfort from the manager. Tracy simply shrugged. Order at the counter. And if you're planning to sit long, I suggest a spot near the kitchen. We need to keep space available. A subtle reminder that he didn't belong in the light. Michael didn't argue. He stood up and walked to the counter, not because he accepted the instruction, but because he wanted to see the full picture, every look, every gesture, every whispered comment from behind the kitchen door. That's when he heard a small sound, like someone swallowing hard behind the counter. A young waitress, still holding a half-loaded tray, turned her face away in silence. He noticed her, thin, sun-worn skin, hair tied neatly but soaked with sweat. She didn't complain. But he saw the way her eyes dropped to the floor when Tracy walked by as if trying to hide something. Michael saw it. And he felt it. He didn't need a profit and loss sheet to know what was wrong. All he needed was a space full of sunlight and the shadows it revealed. Outside, the sun scorched every inch of the sidewalk. But inside the diner, the air grew colder, not from the AC, but from the look in Tracy's eyes. She stood behind the counter, arms folded, her head tilted slightly, watching him as if she were evaluating a piece of cheap furniture that had been put in the wrong place. That seat is for regulars, she said, tone flat yet quietly laced with disdain. If you're just ordering coffee, please move to another table. Or take it to go. No one said anything. No sound interrupted the silence, only the soft clink of ice in Michael's glass of water as he lifted it to take a sip. Not because he was thirsty, but because he was holding something back and listening. He set the glass down. No reaction. No protest. He didn't change seats. He just sat there quiet and steady like a stone in a rushing stream. Back straight, eyes calm. But behind that composure, a storm was gathering. And in that very moment, something began to crack. From behind the counter, a young staff member emerged, arms holding a tray of freshly toasted bread, still warm, not yet placed on the shelf. Her name was Riley, roughly 24. Chestnut hair tied back, faded sneakers, and an apron dulled by too many washes. Not because she was careless, but because the uniform here was the last thing anyone cared about. Riley's eyes scanned past Michael and stopped at his hands. Calloused, strong fingers, sinewy arms, the kind that told you this man wasn't unfamiliar with hard work. Not a picky customer. Not someone looking for trouble. Just someone enduring something no one should face in a café, invisible discrimination. Riley turned toward Tracy. She wanted to say something, but the manager's eyes sliced through the air like a blade. Cold. Sharp. Unyielding. Riley swallowed hard. Eyes averted. But her feet still carried her forward. Standing before the table, Riley bowed slightly, her voice almost a whisper. Sorry for the inconvenience. Would you like me to take your order, sir? Michael looked at her. Not like a customer looks at a server, but like someone who had once walked the same path, recognizing his own eyes in hers. Eyes that had once bowed, not out of guilt, but hunger. He nodded gently.
Just a black coffee.
A slice of toast. No butter.
No marmalade.
And no need to apologize for someone else. Riley bit her lip, uncertain how to respond, but Michael could see it beneath her furrowed brow was a soul wrestling with conflict. He'd seen those eyes before. In his mother, when she had to beg her supervisor for an early paycheck. In a former assistant who juggled 2 jobs just to keep her younger sister in school. And now in Riley. At that very moment, the café which had seemed peaceful began revealing its true face. No investigation needed. No data. Just the right person sitting down at the right time in the right place. Behind Riley, Tracy stepped forward, dropping the tray onto the counter with a sharp clack, as if to emphasize that kindness had no place here. She glanced at Riley and muttered, part command, part mockery, "Don't upset the customer. Remember, we serve. We don't apologize for others." Riley bowed her head, biting her lip fingers, tightening around the coffee tray, clinging to what little dignity she had left. Michael saw it. And in that fleeting moment, he made a decision. Not just about the meal, but about the future of this entire branch. He nodded, replying in a warm, steady voice, coffee and toast. Thank you. The words were simple. But to Riley, they felt like a breath returned to her lungs in a room stifled by pressure. She nodded softly, almost grateful, and turned to walk toward the kitchen. As she passed the counter, Tracy leaned in, not even lowering her voice, making sure nearby tables could hear. You don't need to overdo it. Just finish your tasks first. No yelling. But every word hit like a scratch on the skin. Riley froze for just a second, enough for those paying attention to see her spirit sag. She didn't reply, just lowered her head and continued walking, shoulders slightly hunched. Michael watched her go, his gaze heavy. At this point, he was no longer evaluating service. He was witnessing how decency gets smothered bit by bit in a system he once built on nothing but belief. He remembered the earliest days of Brass Bean when he was just a young man clearing tables at a tiny café on West Avenue. He once swore if he ever opened a coffee chain of his own, kindness would be the standard, not the exception. But here at Sunrise Diner, a branch whose interior design he personally approved, every value he stood for had faded, or worse, become distorted beyond recognition. About 5 minutes later, Riley returned. She carefully set the tray down, a steaming black coffee and a slice of golden toast beside a small dish of butter. Her hand trembled slightly, not from the heat, but from something deeper, unnamed. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable earlier. Her voice was soft, but there was a catch in her throat, as though emotions held back since the start of her shift had finally risen too high to swallow. Michael didn't have time to respond. because Riley, standing upright, bit her lip, took half a step back as if to keep her emotions at bay, and then suddenly turned away, pulling a napkin from her apron. And she cried. Not loudly, just quiet tears falling onto the backs of her slender hands that trembled as they tried to stay still. I'm 2 weeks late on rent, and if tips aren't enough this week, I'll lose my place. No one interrupted. No suitcase zipping. No small talk from nearby tables. The cafe, once noisy with espresso machines and clattering dishes, was now stilled, caught in a silence thick with emotion. Michael sat motionless. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, but he didn't reach for it, nor did he blink, because in his mind, he could see it all clearly, the flashy executive meetings, the polished KPI reports all those times. He reassured himself the system is working. But here, right in front of him, that system had let a good server clearly devoted cry over not affording a roof over her head. That was the line.
He exhaled softly.
Not a sigh, but to stop the anger from boiling over.
Because he knew a real CEO doesn't act on impulse.
He must act with clarity and with conviction. Riley wiped her tears with the napkin, bowing even lower. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that to a customer. It's just, I don't know what else to do anymore. Michael didn't speak. He simply reached for another napkin and gently slid it across to her. It's all right. You just did the bravest thing anyone has done today. She looked up at him, eyes still wet, surprised by his words. Because for so long, Riley had been made to feel like a burden just for being honest. In the corner of the room, an elderly customer silently lowered his newspaper, his eyes now fixed on Riley, not with pity, but with understanding. Behind the counter, Tracy, sensing the shift in energy from the other guests, stepped forward. But instead of adjusting her tone, she offered a sugar-coated jab. Riley, if you're not feeling well, go take a break in the back. Don't let your feelings affect the customers. Michael turned toward her, his voice colder now. No. She's doing exactly what she should, serving with kindness. The words struck the room like a bell. Riley didn't speak, but she stood a little taller. A moment of silence stretched out as if the entire cafe held its breath after Michael's declaration. But it didn't last. From the corner table, a young man, blonde hair, neatly trimmed, shirt sleeves rolled, set down his cappuccino and stood up. He walked slowly toward Riley, took out his wallet, pulled out a $50 bill, and without saying a word, placed it next to the plate of toast on Michael's table. Then he turned to Tracy, his gaze calm but piercing, as if his thoughts were loud enough for everyone to hear. I don't know how your system works, but if kindness gets reprimanded, then your system has a problem. Another guest, a girl in a hoodie studying on her laptop near the counter, quietly closed her computer, stepped forward, and placed a $20 on the counter. She turned to Riley and said, "You're not just a server. You're the reason people still want to come back here?" The atmosphere in the cafe shifted from confusion to unity. And that shift was what made Tracy lose her grip for the first time. All of you, what are you thinking? I'm the manager here, and she's disrupting the shift. Her voice cracked, no longer able to stay composed. But the next response didn't come from Michael. It came from an elderly woman near the door, white hair, a deep red shawl. She hadn't spoken all morning. Now she slowly stood up, leaning on her cane, and stepped toward the counter, each step carrying the weight of a generation that was once made to feel invisible. I come here every week, and I used to think this place was warm. But if I don't speak up today, then I'll have to question who I've become. She turned to Riley, reaching out with a hand as gentle as a grandmother's dear. What do you need most right now? Riley looked around confused, her hands still clenched, her voice choking. I just need to keep a place to live. The woman nodded, then reached into her coat and took out a bank card, placing it on the counter near Tracy. Transfer this girl $300. Label it as kindness bonuses and deduct it from my tab this month. The cafe went still, not out of shock, but from emotion. Tracy stepped back half a step, unsure what to do for the first time. She looked around and met Michael's eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't harsh. Just quiet, the silence of someone who had already made up his mind. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a silver employee badge engraved with founder brass bean. He placed it on the counter. The sound of the metal hitting the surface was like a bell of reckoning. Thank you to everyone here for showing me something I couldn't find in any report. And Riley, be ready. Tomorrow, you'll start at the Central Branch. Position new employee training lead. Applause erupted, not hesitantly, not alone. One person, then another, and soon the entire CAF standing clapping for Riley. Not because she was a victim, but because she had the courage to be honest in a place that had forgotten how. Riley covered her mouth.
Tears fell again, but this time from relief.
Michael turned back to Tracy. You won't be running this location anymore. Someone will temporarily take over for the next 48 hours. And after that, if you want to return, you'll start from the apprentice position. No further explanation was needed. He turned back to Riley, placed a hand gently on her shoulder, not as a boss, but as a father quietly proud of the daughter who had weathered the storm. Michael set his napkin down slowly, as if marking the end of a role he had written, and played himself. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a short number. His voice was firm, but didn't need to be raised. Emily, activate Protocol 17. I'm at Portwell Sunrise Branch. On the other end, no questions. Just a crisp response, like a command from headquarters. Understood, Mr. Foster. The internal team is on its way. Michael hung up the phone and slipped it back into his coat pocket. He removed his glasses, wiped the lenses gently with a corner of his handkerchief, then looked up, his gaze fixed on Tracy, who now stood frozen like stone. No anger. No dramatic stage. Just the truth spoken slowly but sharp as a blade slicing through paper. My name is Michael Foster. I am the founder of the Brass Bean Chain.
Tracy's eyes widened.
Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Michael didn't pause, and today I walked into a branch that bears my name and was treated like a nuisance. I saw with my own eyes a staff member choke back tears because she couldn't afford rent. Not because she was incompetent, but because the system chose silence over compassion. The air in the CAF split in two. On one side, utter shock. On the other, a quiet, satisfying vindication. As if everyone had just witnessed a scene where the main character finally unmasks the villain. The college girl in a hoodie near the door, the one who had spoken up for Riley, gasped. Wait, that's him, the real founder. Guests at nearby tables stirred. A few reached for their phones, but no one dared speak aloud. Because the atmosphere in the CAF now wasn't a scene from a drama. It felt like a moral reckoning unfolding without applause. Tracy tried to hold her voice steady. Mr. Foster, I didn't know you were Michael. Cut her off, not sharply, but with the coolness of a splash of cold water. You don't need to know who I am. What's frightening is that you only show kindness when you know someone has power. Riley still stood there, her hands holding the tissue. But now her expression shifted from shock to overwhelmed release. Are you really him? Michael nodded gently. Yes, sass. And what hurts me most isn't being turned away. It's watching your kindness treated as a problem. By now, Tracy had backed against the counter, almost hiding behind the register. But no one moved to shield her. Because just then the CAF door opened. 3 people in dark suits walked in, carrying clipboards and name badges marked INTERNALOP SFOSTERG One of them stepped forward, reaching out a hand to Michael. Good afternoon, Mr. Foster. Internal audit team on site. Please confirm your directive. Michael didn't look at the clipboard. No documents needed. He simply gestured lightly toward Tracy. Effective, immediately suspend this branch manager. Transfer full operational control to the oversight team for 48 hours. And reinstate all unpaid staff entitlements from today's lunch shift, starting with Ms. Riley. A quiet exhale rippled through the room. No one knew who it came from. But the moment that gave everyone true lasting satisfaction was when Michael turned to face the customers and said, if any of you have ever felt dismissed at a store, judged for what you wore, or believed that the system doesn't side with the good, then today I want to say a just system knows how to make things right. The CAF stood still until suddenly one person clapped. Not for show, but because everyone knew something right had just happened at exactly the right moment. A round of applause broke out, then one more person, then another, then the entire CAF. But Michael simply raised his hand slightly, signaling for everyone to stop. He didn't need applause. He needed change, and he began right there. He turned to the head of the audit team. I want to begin the reassessment process at this location, not through paperwork, but through direct questions. The man nodded, took notes. Ready. Michael turned back to Riley, but this time it wasn't a look of sympathy. It was trust clear and public in front of everyone, Riley. Are you willing to temporarily oversee operations at this location for the next 2 weeks? The room felt like it had been drained of oxygen. Riley, still holding a tissue, stood frozen. Me, sir, yes? Not because you know who I am, but because I saw you do the right thing when no one stood with you. And that's something no degree can teach. Tracy panicked and interjected, she's not qualified, she's just a part-time employee. Michael looked up. His voice was sharp, but still didn't need to be loud, and you've just proven that working full-time doesn't mean having full-time integrity. Tracy went silent. Her face turned pale. Riley was nearly speechless. She stepped back, glanced around the caf at strangers, now nodding in her direction, a student giving her a quiet thumbs up and an older gentleman placing his hand over his heart in silent encouragement. She turned to Michael, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll try my best, if it helps make things better. Michael simply nodded. You don't need to promise. Let your actions keep speaking for you. At that moment, the internal team began collecting staff badges, filing reports on the spot. Tracy was required to sign her suspension notice. Her hands trembled, but no one stood by her side to offer sympathy, because everyone was too busy looking toward Riley, who had now stepped beyond the role of a quiet, overlooked server. She had become the embodiment of what the system had long forgotten, that kindness has a voice. Michael didn't leave right away. He walked to the counter, eyeing the crooked house rule sign on the wall with its faded phrase, "We serve from the heart." He took it down. Starting tomorrow, I want every branch to display a new sign. Kindness isn't a skill, it's a choice we make again every day. The audit team wrote it down. Customers began to stand, but not to leave. A middle-aged couple approached Riley. The woman pulled out a $100 bill, placed it on the pastry tray beside the counter. I haven't eaten anything here yet, but today I witnessed something far more valuable than breakfast. A young man wearing headphones nodded, placing another $20 next to it. Thank you for not staying silent. Within just 2 minutes, Riley's pastry tray had turned into a place of belief. Each bill wasn't a tip. It was a thank you for someone brave enough to speak up in a place where silence had become the norm. Riley lowered her head, but this time not out of fear. She cried again, but this time her tears were from being seen. The glass door opened once more, and this time it wasn't a customer. Emily Park, National Director of Operations for the Brass Bean System, stepped in her stride, quick and resolute. Behind her were 2 assistants in silver-gray uniforms, the company emblem sharp on their left chest. No introductions needed. No signal from Michael. She already knew why she was there. Emily stopped in the center of the caf, her eyes scanning the space, not just observing staff, but sensing the atmosphere. A caf, once buzzing with energy, now holding its breath in a moment of real transformation. Michael said, "Just 1 sentence, proceed to step 2. Emily nodded, turning to her 2 assistants. One opened a tablet. The other began a live head count of the current shift. Michael stepped closer to the counter. His voice wasn't loud, but every word dropped like a lock clicking shut. All personnel on the afternoon shift are temporarily suspended, effective immediately. No one dared respond. Only Tracy, standing near the espresso machine, took a small step back. Michael wasn't done. Portwell branch will close for 48 hours to undergo a full operational restructure. Every procedure, every point of service will be rewritten from scratch. The entire caf fell into a silence as if gravity had pulled them inward. And the first name on the new roster is Riley. Riley could barely breathe. No one smiled. No one clapped. Only sacred silence, not born of fear, but of deep agreement. Emily made notes. The assistants began collecting staff badges, verifying work shifts, and marking the suspension list. Everything ran like clockwork, but not coldly. It showed a system finally waking up with humanity. Tracy gripped the edge of the counter, blurting out, I was just following protocol. Everything I did was per company guidelines. Michael stepped slowly toward her, his gaze direct, not angry, not pitying. Only the integrity of a founder who had just reclaimed the soul of his system. You are not being suspended for breaking rules. You are being suspended for forgetting that people come before protocol. Tracy opened her mouth as if to protest, but she stopped, because she understood there was nothing left to defend but a formula she no longer believed in. Michael turned toward Riley. You won't have to do this alone. Someone will guide you. But today you did what no training manual can teach you chose right even when no one required you to. She nodded. Tears still at the corners of her eyes, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of someone finally trusted. Moments later, Michael turned to Emily. I want the old personnel handbook for this branch sealed. And I want a new sign placed out front. Emily nodded. She had brought it with her as if she'd known. A simple wooden plaque hand-carved was placed at the entrance. It read, we don't serve perfectly. We serve with kindness. No flowery language. No advertising. Just one sentence, but enough to make every customer reflect and every staff member remember why they chose this job. The moment the wooden sign was set down, a new figure stepped forward. An elderly man with silver hair, lean but standing tall, walked out from a corner of the diner no one had noticed before. His name was Henry, 72 years old, one of Sunrise Diner's oldest regulars. No one knew he'd been there since the beginning. No one expected he had witnessed everything from the first moment a customer was turned away to the reveal of the CEO. Henry walked up and stopped in front of the new sign. He looked at the hand-carved words, then turned to Michael and said slowly, I've sat here for over 200 mornings these past 3 years, and this is the first time I've seen someone brave enough to change the very place they created. He removed the small badge from his chest, the system's gold customer emblem, and placed it next to the wooden plaque. I don't need privileges. I just need to know that someone here still dares to choose what's right. At that moment, a round of applause broke out from the young woman near the window. Then another from behind Riley. Then the whole diner stood. No cheering. No loud celebration. Just waves of quiet, heartfelt clapping like the sound of a burden being lifted after witnessing too much injustice for too long. Riley looked around, overcome. She wasn't the main character, but now she was the symbol of something good, something seen, and something worth defending. Michael walked up to Henry and extended his hand. Thank you. I believe every big company needs a customer like you and a sign like this. Henry smiled and took his hand. And founders like you should remember this longer than they remember the numbers. Emily stood at the back, eyes still observing every reaction. She signaled her assistant to place another notice on the front door, but with new wording, we are not closing because we failed. We are pausing to get it right. Michael walked toward the door, his hand brushing the tarnished brass handle, the same one from the day the diner first opened. He paused, then turned back. His gaze wasn't aimed at anyone in particular, but seemed to reach through the entire space from the table where Riley still stood to the barista counter, and finally to the wall clock 7 minutes behind, but no one had noticed. His voice wasn't loud, but each word sank deep into every soul present. I didn't build brass bean to race the numbers. Not to become the largest coffee chain, but so that anyone walking in from a cold morning or a long day would know they were welcome. A pause. Then he looked toward Riley with the gaze, not of a boss, but of someone who believes fairness is not a slogan on the wall. It's in the choices we make when we face someone who has nothing to offer but kindness. At that moment, it no longer felt like a Wednesday morning. It felt like a graduation. No music, no stage, but a lesson carved deep into the hearts of all who witnessed it. Michael said nothing more. He stepped out the door, but just before it closed, he paused for 1 second. The wind slipped through the gap, causing the wooden sign to flutter slightly. We don't serve perfectly. We serve with kindness. And then the door closed.
Softly, like the final period at the end of a sentence.
Inside the diner, no one smiled. No one clapped right away. Riley held the tissue in her hand, but this time not to wipe tears, but as if she were holding on to something that had just been given to her a sense of worth. She turned to the remaining customers, eyes meeting eyes, as if they had all just gone through something bigger than a cup of coffee, bigger than an internal audit. And then the first clap echoed. No one knew where it started, but it spread. Stronger. More real. Because everyone knew today, a system chose to fix itself. A true CEO doesn't walk in to judge. They quietly sit down, order a cup of coffee, and listen to the things that never make it into the reports: forgotten tears, small acts, no one praises, and good people just waiting for someone to stand up for them. Cultural change doesn't begin with a seminar. It begins with a question: who will be the first to stand up for what's right when no one forces them to, and today the answer was clear.